Rwanda is known as the land of 1,000 mountains, and also the home of the last remaining mountain gorillas. In more recent times, it's gained an international reputation for its cleanliness. This isn't by coincidence. The country puts a large focus on this, and people are truly proud of their city and country being as clean as it is. Some things are just because of the way citizens choose to live, such as the surprising amount of electric vehicles. Other things are actually part of government oversight to keep the place clean. For example, each person pays a little under $2 a month for a weekly trash pickup. They also created a plastic bag ban in 2008. There's actually a punishment by fine or imprisonment for establishments caught selling plastic bags. And they were handing out reusable bags on arrival to the Kigali airport to people who wanted them. And lastly, a concept known as umuganda, which I'm probably mispronouncing, but umuganda is a once per month holiday where citizens are required to spend a few hours bettering their environment through community service. Activities include things from growing community gardens to repairing rundown buildings. In addition, I've never felt quite so safe in other African capitals. Day or night, solo or with others, I felt 100% safe walking around Rwanda. People were so nice, always saying hi, offering directions or help. All this has created an environment that is 100% worth visiting. For comparison, just one country to the west we find the DRC, whose capital is Kinshasa, where trash and dirt lined the street, and the hotel staff even warned me that it was in my best interest to stay within the guarded hotel. Thank you to the country and people of Rwanda for a great trip. Now, let's see what kind of an airline these people whipped up. Entrance to the Kigali airport begins with a security check. All cars must place their luggage on the flat to be inspected, and all people must pass through a security check. About 10 minutes later, we were back in the car and could drive the rest of the way up the road to the terminal. This trip actually occurred just before Christmas time, so it was great to see the decorations, and I have to say that for such a small airport, it actually has some of the best lights I've seen in my travels. While I do like this airport, the growth of the country is demanding a newer, larger, and nicer airport. That is on the horizon as construction began for a new Kigali airport in 2017. Money was becoming an issue in accomplishing the goals of this new airport, but as of recent, whether for better or worse, Qatar Airways purchased 49% of RwandAir, creating a new partnership, but it also led to Qatar Airways purchasing a 60% stake in the new airport and its construction. The airport really isn't all that big. As a matter of fact, the terminal only really has a couple gates without any jet bridges, so it makes sense why, outside, we really only see a small parking lot and a couple rental car kiosks. One side of the building is for arrivals, so we walked around to the departure side. In the middle, however, was a little cafe that seemed to have some good stuff, but I was about to have plenty of food, so I decided to hold off for now. At the entrance for departures, we walked up the entrance ramp, past the departures board, and then showed my reservation to the security who allowed me into the check-in lobby. The open-air room was mostly just seating and ticketing offices. Speaking of which, RwandAir had what seemed like managerial offices here as well, in addition to one of the nicer ticketing offices I've seen, complete with couch seating. Much better than the cramped, sweaty stall of a ticket office that I used a little while ago in Lagos, Nigeria. Around the corner are the check-in desks. They seem to rotate between different airlines, but the signage made it easy for us to not only find the RwandAir desks, but also the business class desk. It helped that there were no other airlines departing for the rest of the night, so only RwandAir was set up at this time. Immediately to the right of the check-in counters was the escalators up to immigration and security. One thing I noticed, I know the airport and airline are government owned, but they didn't take the RwandAir advertising lightly. You'll see signage in every corner of the airport. Through security, there was a fork in the road. To the right was the shortcut to the gates, and to the left was the food, shops, seating, and lounge. I did appreciate that the airport entrance, check-in, immigration, and security all had fast-track lanes for business class passengers, so I was able to get to this part of the terminal fairly quickly. I actually thought they had some great shops in this small little area as well. All kinds of souvenirs made here in Rwanda as opposed to cheap souvenirs typically made overseas. And then in the back is the stairs to the gates. There are 5 gates, but as you'll see, they pretty much all lead to the same place. It really just allows for different holding areas. With roughly an hour until boarding, it was time to see the RwandAir Dream Lounge. As far as I can tell, it's the only lounge at the airport, meaning it's probably shared with all the airline's passengers. The lounge honestly wasn't much smaller than the main seating area of the terminal, so it was a nice space to hang out in, especially once the Johannesburg flight left and there was only a handful of people left sharing the space. The seating was mostly grouped in one section with the dining in the other. The seating was grouped into sections with little partitions as well, so that even though it was one big open space, there was some level of privacy amongst the people here. Throughout the lounge, there was probably more charging ports than seats. From what I saw, everyone in the lounge had an outlet. Some people even had two. They also had a few TVs with different soccer games on. The common entertainment between Europe and Africa. In the back corner, there was a kids area with some toys and playhouses, although for half the time I was in the lounge, some dude on a business phone call went in there, closed the door for privacy, while there were kids in the lounge with their parents. Kind of funny considering the little smoking booth in the corner had to have been a better spot for that, all things considered. I do really wish this was a daytime flight, as the windows from the lounge have a view out to all of the hills of Kigali. You can kinda make out the rolling hills just by the lights, but I have to imagine it's 10 times more beautiful in the daylight. There actually was a shower in the bathroom, although I was told on entry that it's currently going through some maintenance and wasn't available at this time. As far as the buffet offerings, it was all a little bit sad. Most of the flights must have left earlier in the day because it seemed as if every option that did exist here was almost completely empty, and they didn't really show any signs of refilling them. The salads, for example, or should I say salad singular, if we can even call it that, more of just a carrot with cold cuts. I got some food including the vegetable soup, which I had to scrape off the edge of the pot, it was so empty. I will say that the food I was able to get was all pretty good though, although I did have to have an MMA fight basically against the ketchup bottle just to get any out for my potatoes. About 5 minutes before boarding, the lounge agent walked around the lounge announcing for all London-bound passengers to head to Gate 5 for boarding. Out of the lounge and upstairs to the gate holding areas of gates 4 and 5. Typically, the upstairs gates are for jet bridges while downstairs gates are for bus gates, but you'll see that at Kigali it seems as if they all feed to the same hallway, leading me to believe that they did this as a way to just maximize the amount of gates that they could fit in this space. We were marked as boarded upon entering the gate holding area and never needed to scan our tickets again. For business class passengers, however, in order to separate them and make sure they get priority boarding, they opened Gate 4's holding area and allowed business class passengers to use that space. So after scanning my boarding pass to enter the Gate 5 holding area, I was directed into the boarding area adjacent. Less than 2 minutes later, 2 RwandAir employees propped the back door open and then led us down the stairs and out to the ramp. Once on the ramp, you'll see that there is doors from the terminal going out for departing passengers, but then there's this slightly more grand entrance for arriving passengers. I am glad I got to see this somewhat unique airport before the new one opens up. On our stroll out to our airplane, we got views of the airport and the hills surrounding the airport, and of course our Airbus A330-300, delivered to RwandAir 7-ish years ago. RwandAir actually has 3 A330s, but this is their only 300 variant, and now serves London, Brussels, and Paris, as it holds 10 more business class passengers than the 200 variant, making it better for the more premium markets. Welcome to what I find a beautiful and unique cabin of RwandAir's A330 business class. I can't think of other carriers that combined green and brown interior colors, but I kinda love it. That, combined with the different bulkhead designs, pieces together what I find to be a great looking cabin. It actually appears to be the same seat design of the South African and Scandinavian Airways A330s, but in a different color, so I'll let y'all pick which one you prefer. As everyone climbs on board behind us, let's look around the seat, which begins with the headrest, which can tilt and has the decoration of the RwandAir logo. The seat itself is actually a nice width, and the firmness can be adjusted, as you'll see later with the seat controls. The armrest against the window can also be adjusted. It helps to make a wider surface for sleep, although it doesn't get as flushed with the surface as others do. The seat had 1 full window and 2 half windows, let's just call it 2 windows. In front of us is the TV, which I found to be extremely annoying because of the glare which was present at all times, unless the cabin was completely dark. The side of the TV also had a USB charging port, which was definitely slower. It charged my watch, but couldn't charge my phone. That was next to the smaller literature pocket with air sickness bag and safety card, which were kind of blocking the coat hook. Below that was the larger literature pocket with the in-flight magazine and another air sickness bag. So like, are people just getting that sick on RwandAir or something? Under the TV is the footwell. I do like the ones with the ramp up to the footrest, as it allows for a good footrest when not in the fully lie-flat position. The only drawback is that I find the footwell to be a bit narrow for side sleepers. There is a large countertop at each seat, and for additional comfort and privacy, I suggest the even-numbered rows, as the counter is on the aisle side. The odd-numbered rows are just a bit too exposed for my taste. The tray table comes out with the push of a button, and then a lot of clunking noise as it pulls out. Perfectly awkward when you're trying to get it out for working in the middle of the night. Right next to the tray table is some of the seat controls. This is mostly the shortcuts, since there's more diverse controls above the counter. Speaking of which, you'll see here above the counter that we have a reading light, dimmable and swivelable, and right below that is the rest of the seat controls. In addition to the shortcuts, we can also adjust things like the leg rest, lumbar support, seat firmness, and the massage feature, which is less of a massage and more so just a sort of rolling vibration. There is a remote next to that which can help control the TV, although it has very limited controls, the most useful one being that little square, which is really just a touchpad. Around the corner, still above the counter, we find the universal and USB charging ports and headset jack. Personally, not the best spot I would have chosen, solely because you end up with cables going all over the place, especially if your laptop is on the tray table. Above that is the main storage for the seat. Not enclosed, but it does have a lip on the edge of the shelf, which is big enough to hold chargers, amenities, reading materials, water bottles, and almost anything else that you'd realistically have with you. Biggest bummer for me was, of course, not having overhead air vents. You know that's a common complaint of mine, but this flight was specifically tough since Rwanda was about 90 degrees Fahrenheit and London was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 33 to -1 degrees Celsius. So I kinda had to dress for one or the other. Fortunately, I dressed for Rwanda's weather, so the lack of air vents was slightly better, but that outfit choice did give me some strange looks upon arrival to London. As far as the amenities we were given, first off was the bedding, which included this comforter. Slightly thin and didn't have a ton of insulation, but with no air vents, I ended up still kicking it off anyway. Then a single pillow, kinda small but medium firmness, so I'm sure most people wouldn't have a problem with it. I've just become spoiled with United's famous gel pillows. We got noise-canceling headphones with the seat as well. Not the most comfortable headphones in the world, and tough to sleep with, but they work just fine for 9 hours. Then was the amenity kits. The bags were nice quality, but kind of a strange material in my opinion. The contents included pretty much only what you'd need for a 9-hour flight. I just found it weird that the toothbrush and toothpaste were only like half wrapped and not sealed. I did, however, enjoy the scent of the lotions, which I used to apologize to my skin for the lack of sunscreen I used while outside in Africa all day. There is a spot for a water bottle or two in the storage in the seat, although I found it strange that we weren't given a water bottle at any point. That's not to say we didn't get any beverages, as shortly before pushback we were given hot towels and a choice of beverage. My choice was an absolutely incredible pineapple mint. There also must have been a VIP on my flight, because right before we closed the doors, a bus pulled up with only 2 people in it, with nice bags and jackets. They were escorted to their business class seats, the doors shut, and we were on our way. Then on arrival in London, a nice car was waiting for them specifically. They got off and were whisked away. As we taxi out, a little about RwandAir's history, as RwandAir only actually began operations about 20 years ago. After Rwanda's 1994 genocide, the government made efforts to revive the former national carrier Air Rwanda. Eventually, it was rebranded as RwandAir, and through about 2010, work was done mostly to get the airline incorporated and standardized. Starting in 2010, the airline began acquiring its first new aircraft, some leased, some from Boeing itself. They also began expanding regionally across Africa, mostly to southern parts. Since 2017, RwandAir expanded outside of Kigali Airport by getting 7th Freedom Rights in Benin, so that they could open an additional hub at Cotonou's International Airport and serve plenty of airports in North and West Africa from there, so they wouldn't have to buy longer-range aircraft to reach those places from Kigali. By the end of the 2010s, perhaps the most exciting part of RwandAir, they placed orders for 2 737 MAXs and 2 A330 NEOs. With those aircraft, they also planned to serve Guangzhou, China via Mumbai. They also applied for FAA Category 1 ratings to serve New York. They actually established another hub at Accra, Ghana, so that they could serve New York with the A330neos via Accra. To help inspire the growth, they introduced something called Flight Pass, which was a way for people to buy a flight at the best available price and pick a travel date at a later time. Since then, COVID completely blew up these plans. Guangzhou was canceled, as was their new aircraft order and New York plans. With the pandemic recoveries around the world, it'll be interesting, though, to see if RwandAir resumes the plans it had just a few years ago. In the air, it's time to look through the in-flight entertainment system. Mostly from shots I got before departure. Considering their route network, I was curious how many titles I would recognize from their system. First off, the movies. There was 144 titles across all different genres and languages. They didn't have a ton of popular English movies, but they did have Barbie, because of course they did. Everyone does right now. You also know I'm a fan of being able to add things to favorites. The TV shows were a similar story. There was actually a fair amount of programs, although the 138 is a bit misleading since shows with multiple episodes were counted on how many episodes they had, so not truly 138 unique TV shows. That being said, I was happy to see multiple episodes of certain shows. It wasn't always consecutive episodes, but still better than a single episode, or truly like 10 random episodes. I found the music category to be a bit funny. You'll see that we can obviously sort by genre. From there, it's mostly just albums of random songs by various artists. Even stranger perhaps is that if you open the albums, it shows the songs but not the artists. There's probably a reason, but I feel like copyright lawyers would have a field day with this. The in-flight magazine that's available in the literature pocket is also available right on the seatback TV, where you can zoom, you can scroll, and you can bookmark pages. And if you really like reading off that screen, go ahead and read the safety card there too. The kids section on this screen is basic, but does include a good grouping of kids movies. It just doesn't have music, TV shows, or maps, like some other entertainment systems do. They also had a survey, which I gladly filled out towards the end of the flight. For the map, there are two options. First off, you can tap the flight timer in the top left and get the smaller map. This is nice if you're watching something and want an update on the flight progress without closing your program, although it does still pause whatever you're watching. If you want, you can hit the expand button in the corner as well, and you'll be able to view the map in full screen. Unfortunately, it's one of my least favorite types of maps, as there's no adjustability to it. You can't move or zoom the map, it just scrolls through the different pages, including the flight info in like 4 or 5 languages, then the map in different amounts of zoom. Unfortunately, this means that if you want to quickly check on the map, there's a chance that it's showing the stats and you'll have to be patient and wait for the map to come back up. Then the Wi-Fi. RwandAir's A330s do have Wi-Fi service, kinda. The only option is available for $10 and it's a messaging service only. I believe there are good amounts of outage zones across Africa, or at least there was on the other airlines I flew, so I'm wondering if the lack of intercontinental service just takes away the justification of the investments of Wi-Fi. Maybe someday though. On our climb out from Kigali, they also came by with our menus for the flight. We were given a drink menu and a food menu. The food menu showed the offerings for our 2 meals, a dinner service after departure and a breakfast service before arrival. They already mentioned they would try to serve the dinner as quick as possible and the breakfast as late as possible so that people could maximize their sleep. The drink menu actually had multiple pages, mostly just because of the wine list. The first page was all the non-alcoholic options, followed by the alcoholic options, then 2 pages of wines and champagnes. Then came the RwandAir branded tablecloths and time for the dinner orders. We must have still been on climb out because this happened fast. They came by so quickly to get our food and drink orders, in fact, that I kinda panicked since I hadn't actually thought about what I wanted to order. So when they said Coke, I said sure, and they served it to me at least in a nice RwandAir glass. To start, I chose the chicken Caesar salad over the vegetable salad. It was alright, about what you'd expect for an airplane starter salad. We were also given a bread roll, which was half good. Only reason I say that is because half the roll was super soft, the other half was like eating a rock. So I guess we can tell which part of the roll was exposed to the air for longer. After showing some love to the RwandAir branded silverware and salt and pepper shakers, the entree arrived. I chose the chicken entree and honestly it was incredible. Some of the best cooked airplane chicken I've ever had. The Zot chicken, which hopefully I'm pronouncing right, was accompanied by a shallot and gravy sauce, turmeric rice, and then some spinach and a single cherry tomato. For dessert I got the cherry cake. It was alright, but I'm not a fan of buttercream, so it was just kind of a lot. To wrap up the meal service, I went with a chamomile tea to hopefully calm me down enough for sleep, since there's nothing like finishing a full course meal and then trying to sleep not even 15 minutes later. Speaking of sleep, I had to make my bed. Luckily, the presets make it easy so that you don't have to adjust each piece individually. From the sitting preset, the first stop is a relaxing preset. It does recline the seat a good amount, but doesn't really tip back the bottom part of the seat, which some airlines do to give you the feeling of sort of sitting in a cushiony bucket. You do, however, get the leg rest coming up a bit as well. When just relaxing, I actually reclined a bit more than this and lowered the leg rest a bit to rest my feet on the inclined platform. That's all fine and dandy, but it's not how I want to sleep. So let's use the other preset to get this thing completely flat. It takes only about 10 seconds to get flat, although a few times it got stuck on the way down and I had to release and repress the button. Then we have the full bed. It is kinda wide and it does join with the footrest. My only complaint is that it does get a bit narrow down by the footrest, so if you are a side sleeper, it can get a little bit tight. For your upper body, however, though, if you need a little more space, you can go ahead and lower that armrest to make it a little bit wider. Then we have to dress the bed. First, let's get that pillow over there. Then the blanket. It's a nice size, I just wish it were maybe a bit softer. At least it covers the full surface, and then some. I do think the bed looks good. My only complaint so far is that there's just no mattress pad, and the seat has a few creases that are definitely felt. Although that does mean you can feel the massage feature when sleeping, quote unquote. In addition, you can see here that I found the footwell to be a bit narrow. You could sleep on your back or your side, but you had to keep your legs straight. If bent, your knees would become pinned against the sides. Once the bed was made, to help make it a bit more cozy for sleep, you can turn off the seat's accent lights with the mood lighting button. This turns the counter and footwell lights on and off. The firmness button also helps to decide how firm you'd like the bed to be. One thing I noticed is that because the TV doesn't angle down, the picture became a bit distorted once laying down. However, I needed to get some sleep. Considering this flight wasn't all that long, I needed to maximize my amount of time sleeping. So I'll get some rest, and I'll see y'all shortly. With some of the world's craziest turbulence as we crossed the Sahara Desert, I slept on and off for about 5 hours. By the time I woke up, we were about 2 hours from Heathrow and currently over the Mediterranean. Lavatory on these A330s are horrendously basic. Of all the airlines I've flown the A330 COs with, there's almost never additional color, details, or lighting. As a matter of fact, the only amenity in here was just an air freshening spray. Prior to arrival, we still had a breakfast meal to be eaten, so they served it to those who were awake, which seemed like only me and one other person at the moment. As a matter of fact, half the cabin skipped both meals and just chose to sleep through the flight entirely. To start the meals, we were welcomed with some hot towels. After that, however, it was breakfast time. I decided to start with some Rwandan coffee and a first course, including a plate of fruit, before they came around with a bread basket. After that, I actually went with the vegetarian choice just because it sounded the tastiest. It included butter squash and sautéed mushrooms, a side of spinach and feta crepe, although honestly, I couldn't really taste the feta. As breakfast wrapped up, we were just flying past Paris, which looked great in the night lights. Luckily, we were arriving about 30 minutes ahead of schedule. Unfortunately, that meant that we would land before the sun woke up. A bit unfortunate for the whole flight to happen during the night, as I would have enjoyed the views on arrival and also of this RwandAir A330 wingtip. As we descend, I want to look into RwandAir's expansion plans, while y'all also enjoy the flyby of London we got as we arrived from the southeast of Heathrow. As with any smaller aviation markets, we always like to think about the expansion plans. Seeing countries with low market presence make themselves known in this industry always brings a smile to the face of us who are familiar with the industry. We talked earlier about how COVID canceled the biggest growth plans in the airline's history. Despite still recording a profit loss every year on record, from what I can see, they have given hints at what this post-COVID world could bring. Being government-owned by the world's 147th biggest GDP, it takes a bit of strategy and resourcefulness to make the dreams work. In November, RwandAir was on track to double its fleet and provide better connections within Africa and Middle East. First off, after acquiring 3 more 737s in 2023, they have plans to double their fleet size to 25 within the next 5 years. As far as their China and US expansion plans, it sounds like those will be put on hold. As the CEO Ivan Makolo said in an interview, "I don't think we need to move any further than the African continent. This is the most underserved continent in aviation, with 1.4 billion people, but only 3% of global air traffic." What Ms. Makolo said, I think rings true amongst a lot of Africans, and I think that her plans are honorable and hopefully can help RwandAir establish some real roots. With those, I think they'd be better suited to launch flights to Asia and the Americas once those routes are set. It's similar to how Kenya Airways and Ethiopian Airlines began, and now they have a sizable international market and loads of new aircraft. The partnerships with larger airlines are also hopefully bringing life to the airline. It sounds like RwandAir's best load factors are to Doha and Dubai. Dubai largely for cargo, and Doha due to their new code share with Qatar. For example, flying from Asia or the Americas to Kigali or anywhere else in that region, the cheapest itinerary is commonly through Qatar, then RwandAir from there. One of the biggest struggles when growing an airline is that Africa's taxes on aviation are super high, borderline unnecessary. This is largely because air travel is viewed as an extreme luxury in most of Africa. To help with this, CEO Makolo has joined the talks amongst the leaders in the sustainable aviation fuel studies, specifically to help incentivize it more so that it can become available for cheaper. I have to believe that introduction would help lower taxes in the long run. She is 100% correct that Africa's aviation markets are underserved. I do think that there are deeper issues than just affordable route networks, but regardless, the growth of new markets and fairly new airlines is always fun. As a US citizen, I personally hope they're able to make their dreams of New York service come true, but any success is a benchmark for them coming out of COVID. I wish them all the best, and I can't wait to fly from the new airport and potentially new fleet or cabin in the future. In 2023 on this channel, we tried out the long-haul business class products of 4 of Africa's largest carriers. As a matter of fact, our first video of 2024 also covered an African carrier. RwandAir is now added to that list, and I have plans to try out a couple more this year at some point. Regardless, this does give us a fair sense of comparison when thinking about the value and worth of RwandAir's business class product. First off, I personally feel that they could use a new livery. It's giving me Microsoft Paint vibes, but the colors of the Rwanda flag and culture offer a great base to design a wonderful looking airplane. The seats I thought were great. They offered a fair amount of space, and if you're in an even numbered row, you get the extra privacy with the counter being on the aisle side. I do wish, however, that the tunnel for your legs was a bit wider. Sleeping on my side was tough just because with any bend in my legs, my knees were crammed up against hard plastic. That being said, the seats were comfortable, and the color choice of the seats and bulkheads gives the cabin a fantastic look in my opinion. The food was also amazing. On board, I should say. The lounge food was a bit underwhelming, although I will say that compared to other lounges I've used in Africa, it's probably in the top half at least. So hopefully the new airport brings some new ideas to the table for the lounges. Back to the onboard meals, I thought they had a fair collection of choices, including a couple that stemmed from Rwandan cuisine. Like the chicken dinner I had, that was quite good. The crew, personally, was one of the highlights for me. As with pretty much everyone else I met in Rwanda, the crew was interactive and kind to all of those who chose to stay awake. I had a great conversation with a couple of them before arrival, one of them saying I looked like some English footballer that I've never heard of, which led us to a good conversation, all while I waited for a lavatory to become available. $2,000 was admittedly an expensive cost for a one-way business class ticket, considering the alternative was one stop on KLM for $1,300. I will say that, while expensive, there is value, as not only the airline has its perks, but it's also hard to compete with a non-stop flight sometimes. The last thing I'll leave the video with is that I understand there are mixed emotions about the partnership between Qatar Airways and RwandAir, which does make sense, but at the very least, it's exciting to know that there is money behind the future of RwandAir, a still growing airline. There are some reservations about what that money will actually go towards and the motivations behind it, but it will be interesting to see RwandAir in 5 years or so, just to see where their partnerships and growth will have taken them. But until then, we're left on a cliffhanger, knowing that changes are on the way. I, for one, cannot wait for my next trip to Rwanda, and I would love to fly RwandAir again when that opportunity presents itself. Thank you guys for joining me on today's journey from Kigali, Rwanda to London, England on Rwanda's flag carrier, RwandAir, in their flagship aircraft, the A330-300. Stay tuned for more, and until next Sunday, safe travels. I will see y'all next time.